Now, I spend a lot of time lately trying to figure out what's the best way to record in OBS. I use OBS a lot. I'm not an expert in bitrate, encoding and whatnot, so I had to do everything the old-fashioned way, by testing every setting, every option, one at a time. And the result was actually not what I was expecting. First thing, let's get rid of this big elephant in the room and cover one of the biggest issues I had with OBS. And that is the encoding. As an NVIDIA graphics card owner, I was led to believe that the NVIDIA encoder, the NVENC, is the best choice, second to none and nothing can top it. But for me, the result with this encoder was really choppy as fuck. And I'm not even using an old, outdated graphics card. It's an NVIDIA 4070 Super. I admit it's not the best out there, but also not the worst. Now, back to OBS, I could have lowered the frame rate, I could have lowered the resolution and even the recording quality and eventually get usable footage with this encoder. But then I was thinking, what's the point? Why sacrifice so much just to get some sort of usable footage and throw it in the editing software? And that brought me to the second obvious option, to take the load off from the graphics card and move it on the iGPU with a QSV encoder. Again, to keep it on the hardware, but this time not on the NVIDIA graphics card. And I thought that this will actually work, but the results were also bad. And at this point, I really thought I installed OBS backwards or something, because in my mind, it's not possible to get this type of results with relatively decent hardware. And so the final step, and the one that I was least expecting to work, was software encoding. Either normal or low CPU usage but large file size. Now the normal already gave me good performance, which I never expected, but at a closer look it still feels a little choppy if you're recording in high frame rate. But on the other hand, the low CPU usage with increased file size gave me the best results. The results that I was searching when I started all these testings. But there is a but, it's always a but. You do have to prepare yourself with a lot of free space, because a 10-minute capture with this encoder translates to up to 20 gigabytes of storage. You could lower the recording quality and set it to high quality and minimum file size, but the difference between high quality and indistinguishable quality is, in my opinion, noticeable. And if you want that crisp, what you see is what you get type of recording, then you will never capture in high quality. So you will need a good amount of free space, but in the end I think it's worth it if you want that great quality recording at a higher frame rate. Now, let's talk about higher frame rate. Traditionally, you have the common FPS values, which are the most used values, up to 60 FPS. Then you have the integer values, which are up to 120 FPS, and fractional values, where the sky is the limit, I guess. And here, in my opinion, is a mistake that people often make. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you know better, then feel free to share it in the comments, but in my opinion, recording anything higher than 120 FPS is a mistake. 60 FPS is more than enough, you can do a lot with 60 FPS, but 120 FPS is good if you want that super slow motion clips while editing, especially if you are editing gameplays. So why I believe that it's a mistake to record anything over 120 FPS? Usually people capture within their limits of their display's resolution and FPS. For example, I have a 1440p display at 165 Hz, which means that I can easily record in 165 FPS. But here's the thing, DaVinci Resolve has a max export and editing of 120 FPS. Premiere Pro, I'm pretty sure that it's also maxed at 120 FPS, and many more editing programs don't even export past 60 frames per second. And even if you export in 120 frames per second and upload it on YouTube, YouTube will not play it at a higher frame rate than 60. For example, this video that you're watching right now was edited at 120 FPS and uploaded on YouTube at 120 FPS. And I'm pretty sure you didn't even realize that. If you record anything higher than 120 FPS because you think you have more wiggle room while editing to make that super slow-mo kill shot, I can promise you that you will not notice a thing. Here is an example of 165, 120 and 60 FPS in normal playback, and tell me if you see the difference. And here is a 165 and 120 FPS at 50% slow motion. Tell me if you see a difference. And now at 20% slow motion. Again, do you see any difference? I even went overboard and tested screen capture at 200 FPS, and even if my display is 165, you know, just for the sake of it. And here's the result. And don't forget, this video was edited and exported in 120 FPS. You now on YouTube see it at 60 frames per second max. And to prove it that even if you'd have the 120 FPS file on your device, you will still not see a difference, I added the link in the description of this video and in the pinned comment from where you can download the 120 FPS file and check it out for yourself. You know, cheers, bye, subscribe.